give everyone a little, 5-minute, who is Lance McDaniel and how do we get to here?
Well, great. Well, so
Is 5 minutes enough?
No, I can do it in 2 sentences. I'm from Alva. So I grew up in Alva, which is in the northwest part of the state, which you know, obviously, and was there until I was 13, and I feel like the movie I just made is kind of a direct reflection of the fact that I was raised, exposed to the arts, exposed to different cultures, and given not only appreciation of different people, but an understanding that we're all the same and that we're all, and so I believe I learned a lot of that in Alva. And so for me, my growing up there was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And there was an Alva Boys Choir led by a guy named Fred Newman, where all the I think it was 3rd through 6th graders got to go, and you traveled all over southern Kansas, and you went to rest homes and churches and sang. Yeah. And it's amazing how many Alva people have really great jobs here in the city, and they're not all singers. I mean, there's judges and lawyers and corporate people and a lot of doctors. And I think the confidence you gain as a kid by going and singing with a group of people and in front of all these people you don't know, I just have to believe that mattered. And so growing up in Alva was probably one of the most formative things that happened to me. We then moved down to Oklahoma City, and I went to Edmond, and then went to high school at Purcell and graduated from Heritage Hall. And so I did a kind of the sampler platter of Oklahoma education.
You get to see all of it.
Public and private. And all of those were great. And I think I really benefited from the fact that I had awesome teachers at every single school I went to, and that really cared about me as a person. And then for college, I went to Stanford, and I would say that's another place where my mind was kind of blown apart and then pieced back together. And it took those ideas that I learned in Alva to a new level, which is, okay, you're what is going on with race in America? And I was in school when Rodney King incident happened, and so when he got beat. And so I feel like that was kind of the second place where my mind was really kind of blown and expanded. And then was an internet consultant for about 12 years and built the first website for Levi's and Starbucks and Star Wars and a lot of those really fun ones. And then at 34 decided I really wanted to be a director. And so I started over, and I got a job as a free intern for Grey Frederickson, Oscar winner and fellow podcaster.
Yeah.
And Grey gave me a job, and so I moved from New York to Los Angeles and worked on Cloud 9, which was the first movie from his production company, Graymark, which he started with John Simonelli and Mark Stansberry. And then I worked on $1 Million Baby with Gray's friend Albert Esretti, and that was totally awesome. And then Gray said, "Will you move back home? Because I'm going to do a series of low-budget scary movies." And so I moved home to work on Graymark movies, and I've been home 15 years. And I've worked on independent film the entire time, but I took a 10-year, not break, but 10 years I worked at Deadcenter. So as you know, so I ran the Deadcenter Film Festival. And what I find, what I love so much about Deadcenter is it made me feel more at home than any place in the city when I moved home. So when I came back in 2005, Oklahoma City was very different. We didn't have the park or the river. There were a lot of things that were still just coming. And Deadcenter was one of those bright, shining spots that was, here's 100 different stories from around the world. So it didn't matter kind of what your opinion was. There was going to be some stuff that you loved and stuff that you did not like. And then you would go to these parties and debate with people why you didn't like her. And it was just so exciting and engaging. And it really was the first time I had actively sought out festivals as fun, because I'd been to other festivals, but in other cities. But it was, and so I volunteered for Melissa Scaramucci for 7 years, or for 5 years rather, in programming. And so I would watch almost every movie that would come in for several years, and that was such a great education because I was new at filmmaking. And so to be able to watch hundreds of movies a year that were short films and features and everything really kind of helped shape the kind of stuff I wanted to do. And so then when I was at Dead Center, and they grew Dead Center into a super cool, nationally recognized event before me, and so I think it's important for people to know that what Khaki and Melissa did with the festival that Jason and Justin Floyd founded was they turn it into something super solid, so that when I came on in year 10, I had this existing entity that I could then package and market differently, and so it wasn't, I didn't invent the wheel. What I did was figure out a way to package that wheel and sell it, and create education programs that would allow us to expand across the state, and and start training and doing more rural film classes and stuff like that. So I'm very proud of the 10 years I was at Deadcenter, and I think we accomplished a lot and we grew a ton. But I think that is a direct result of how awesome the people before me were creating something that was so interesting and possible to sell. And then I stepped down in July. And after 10 years, and part of it was I'd been there 10 years. The organization is 20.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a pretty clean break.
Cut,
like, what am I going to run it for 20 years or 30? Like, is this how I'm dying? And so I kind of felt like Alex Picard Davis should not have to be 50 to run this thing. She's smart enough. She's super capable. She's awesome. And so she and I talked about it for about a year and a half. So she knew first.
That's good.
And I'm like, but if you want this job, then let's figure out what you need to do. So the board, because you work for the board of directors.
Right.
Once I'm gone, you work for them. You don't work for me. And she got very active in National Film Festival Alliance, and is now the vice president of the board there. And that has been such a blessing for Deadcenter, and especially when COVID hit, because when theaters shut down, she was immediately on a call every other day with other festivals from Seattle to Sundance to wherever else, saying, what are the technologies? How do we get this going? And so we were one of the first people to fully use Eventive, just because of our timing in June. And so a lot of the success we had with our 20th anniversary was because Alex was involved nationally, is technical. And so I felt like it was a great time to leave. I think the virtual festival was a wild success and super interesting. And then, and 2 weeks later, I got a call about the fact that Race Dance's Hip Hop Nutcracker, which is a dance show that's performed at OCCC and used to be at McGinnis, is not going to be able to happen because they go into Oklahoma City public schools and teach dance, and then that's who makes up the dance show. Well, they couldn't do it because of COVID. And so Chop, who's the founder, said, will you help me make a movie? And I'm like, you betcha, because I'm obsessed with this thing. Yeah. And then separately, a guy named Heath Hayes, who works for the Department of Mental Health here in Oklahoma, said, Lance, there is some funding that we're trying to figure out ways to decrease the stigma around mental health and addiction. Yeah. And I had done a movie in Alva called The Homecoming Trilogy about a woman who gets out of prison and dies because of her addiction. And it was all told through dance, and it's not a very happy movie, but poignant. Yeah. And he saw it, and he was like, would you consider telling a different story, which is that what if that woman got the resources she needed? And I'm like, well, great. So what we came up with is Finding Carlos, which is based on Race Dance Company's Hip Hop Nutcracker, and instead of Clara, it's Carlos who meets his father for the first time. And that's what their dance show is about. And so we took that and expanded it to, and their Carlos was about 6 or 7 years old. We made ours a teenager who's struggling with anxiety and whose parents are addicts, one recovered, and it's him trying to kind of find his way in the world against the backdrop that the father is this world-renowned choreographer. And so there's 11 dance numbers all based on Nutcracker songs. And it's awesome. For me, it's the best movie. It's the most fun I've had making a movie. I think it's the best movie I've made. And the spirit of a bunch of people coming together during the pandemic to make art about helping others allowed a really good spirit throughout it.
Yeah.
And so
So
was that 5?
8. So we did. That was good.